Okay, I think we are already behind the time before even having started this session. So I want to welcome all of you and a good afternoon. My name is Caroline Zacheus. I'm from VDI/VDIT from the Department of European and International Strategy Development. And I will moderate this session today with Stefan.
Yeah. Thank you. My name is Stefan Dijks. I'm the director of EUCAD. We're very happy that you are joining us for this most important session. So this is actually the really most important session where we discuss the important subject of sustainability and how CCAM can help us to get there. So we're really pleased, and in this session we cover the role of innovation and how it will actually add on one side to help us reduce energy demand, but on the other side it might require more energy within the vehicle. So all of these aspects we want to address, and yes, some late information. Hopefully we didn't forget somebody. Is it the right room?
No, I think it's all good. Yeah, to just make like a little scene setter. So as also discussed this morning already multiple times, the energy use of road transport is a significant contributor to global emissions and all other kinds of environmental impacts, not necessarily positive. And so an estimate for 2030 says or accounts the private car for approximately 60% of the greenhouse gas emission within the transport sector, and the transport sector also is overall already accounted for 21% of the overall global emissions. So to tackle this, and as you already mentioned, today we want to see and discuss how we can actually achieve the EU climate targets and the sustainability needs, and how we can move them further into focus. Focusing on exploring how CCAM can contribute to a more sustainable transport sector, but also in discussing, as you mentioned, the positive but also the negative aspects of CCAM on the different levels, such as the vehicle, the traffic, and also the overall transport system level.
So we will look at all these three dimensions, but we will as well look at the synergies between automation and electrification and how we can best use these synergies when we move forward and look into deployment. Now linking the transport infrastructure and the energy infrastructure is another dimension. And finally, we look at the positive impact when we look in general on the transport system and how we could avoid traffic and transport demand through CCAM, avoiding the need for transportation or sharing vehicles, sharing for the use of transportation. So this is the last dimension. Now with that, let me welcome and introduce our speakers thank you for coming, that are joining us today. We will briefly introduce you now and then give a longer introduction on why you are here and what you can tell us right before your short speech. So we're very happy to have with us Željko Šefčík, Director of Autonomous Electric Transports at Enride in Sweden. We have Joanna Zanidaki, Chief Innovation Officer from Ertico, Belgium. We have William Riggs, Professor, University of San Francisco from USA. Thank you for coming. We have Timo Carroll, from CTO for Master Zero in Sweden. Thank you for coming. And we have Laia Pages, Executive and Research Manager at Carnet in Spain. Thank you all for coming.
Yeah, just a quick comment on the format of our session today. So we will have a mixed approach between presentations and statements from our invited speakers. And then we will also have a big focus on the discussion and also on the interaction with all of you and also the people online with the Slido tool. And for that, I want to refer you to slido.com, and you need, well, maybe you can also see it in a second on the screen. Or not? Well, at slido.com, and then with the passcode of EUCAD2023, you can see all our polls that we will launch, and you can also freely ask all your questions that we will then give forward to the panelists. So please get your mobile device and join us on the first warm-up, so to say. We will have a first Slido poll. So I see a lot of mobile phones already, perfect. Something I forgot. You, of course, need to select the breakout session 1, because otherwise you will end up in the other breakout session and maybe get some other inputs. So for our first word cloud, I would like to ask you, please state in one word how, in your opinion, CCAM can increase the sustainability of transportation. So I don't know if you are all able to take that.
Of course, we have only
we
experts.
See already some inputs coming in. Well, I don't know if EUCAD2023 is the right thing to increase the sustainability of transport, but yeah, it's a good way. I see shared is the most prominent, not wanting to move away from this position. We see a lot of behavior change, connectivity, traffic management is also one topic that we will cover within our session. Efficiency, of course. Efficiency is making a move. So let's see if all your views are going to be confirmed, and hopefully you will also be able to expand your perspective during our session a little bit further. And with that, I guess we can...
I think we wait how this will develop, and we'll have a look later. But now to our first speaker, and our first speaker is Željko. He's Director of Autonomous Electric Transport at Einride. Before that, Željko worked for more than 20 years in the transport innovation area. He developed ADAS system at a large vehicle manufacturer and worked as a manager in European and international road transport organizations. Thank you, Željko, for coming.
Thank you very much. This is definitely the best moderators of at this conference, so thank you very much. Thank you also for the introduction. I've spent 20 years working in this field of transport innovation, and I've also spent many years working on CITS, ADAS, etc. So I've had a lot of different titles. Some were fancy, some were less fancy or so. But the most important title for me is that I'm a father. And because of that, I'm also a very big environmentalist. So all of the work, all of these years, I've always been looking at how can we actually reduce the environmental impact that we have from transport? How can we improve also road safety? How can we improve the efficiency of the transports? And this also was the main reason why I decided approximately a year and a half ago to leave the lovely Brussels and to join this Swedish company, Einride, which I'm going to tell you a little bit about right now as a short introduction so that you actually know where I'm coming from. Now, let's see. The presentation. Yeah. So while we're waiting for a presentation, I can just tell you, Einride is a so-called scale-up nowadays. We are one of those unicorns that was established in 2016 with the goal to really radically change the transport, road freight transport by looking at all of its inefficiencies. So for the first, our founders already in 2016 started developing a fully electric truck. As you may know, all of the trucks that we have on the market are coming up first now. We were able to buy our first trucks from vehicle manufacturers in 2021 or 2020, 2021. Until then, we were basically forced to develop our own electric trucks. Now, going electric, as we heard from one of the speakers from Norway this morning, is a part of the solution. There are so many other inefficiencies in the road freight. This is also why we have said that we are also going to autonomous where possible and to go digital wherever it is feasible. Because we need to address multiple challenges that are not all going to be addressed by just going electric. So since then, thank you very much. Since then, we have put on the market what we believe is probably the largest fleet of battery electric trucks with drivers. So the trucks that you see on the left side. If you look at all of the battery electric trucks that we are driving with in Europe and in the US, and those that we have on our purchase order that we have basically purchased but we are waiting to be delivered to us, this accounts for approximately 500 electric trucks that are rolling. We were recently here in Brussels launching with AB InBev with their transports. And on our own, we're also developing our autonomous electric trucks, the ones that you see on your left side, where we don't even have truck driver cabin. So this is where we come to the CCAM benefits. We are fully electric fleet, and what we are doing basically right now is to offer decarbonization to all of the shippers. So we are not a truck manufacturers, even though we are manufacturing our own trucks. We are not truck manufacturer. We are providing decarbonized transports already today to companies such as AB InBev, to companies such as Electrolux, and many others. We are doing that with battery electric trucks with drivers. And when we feel that we are ready and able to convert some of the transport routes to fully electric, we are doing that as well. So a high-tech transport provider that is actually here to decarbonize transports and reduce all of the other challenges that we have. So our project portfolio that we are offering to the customers, for example, AB InBev, is we are providing the electric truck, electric autonomous truck, actually. We are also providing the remote interface where we have the professional truck driver sitting, supervising, not remote driving, but supervising the operation. We are also providing the charging infrastructure to our customers. We are providing the driver if you're driving with battery electric trucks. And very important, we're also providing a fleet management system that is optimized for electric and autonomous trucks. Because all of these things have to depend also on a very good optimization. We would not be able to be profitable with our autonomous or with our electric trucks if we didn't have a very strong digital part to it that is doing all of the optimization. And where needed, we're also complementing our autonomous operations with trucks with drivers, basically. Very short automation, we all know it. It's not possible for anybody to drive anywhere, anytime, under any conditions. This is a gradual, step-by-step introduction. What we are doing right now is that we are operating very much in fenced-in area and nearby areas on public roads. We are doing this, I'm going to show you one example, in the US as an example, and also in a couple of places in Sweden, while we are gradually working towards implementation of automation on public roads and on highways later on. And this is really the overall story as we see it. We are not today one of the companies like our friends from Waymo, Kodiak, etc. The big difference between us and them is that we are already rolling out fleets of trucks, battery electric trucks with drivers, and when we feel that we are good enough, that it's safe, that we have suitable conditions, and that the business case is right, then we are going to be converting these battery electric trucks with our own autonomous fleet, basically. So it's a gradual process. It is going to take many years before we can say that any of the autonomous trucks can drive anytime, anywhere, under any conditions. It is a stepwise process, and I think we all agree on that. Last two slides. This is just some of the slides from some of the operations that we are doing. And the biggest operation is actually right now at General Electric Appliance Park in the US, where we are driving with our trucks in this fenced-in environment. We are scaling right now operations to multiple vehicles. We are basically transporting palletized goods between different parts of the factory. So to conclude from our side, a company that came to fruition to revolutionize transport, looking at all of the inefficiencies, not only the pollution that is coming from the diesel or other fossil fuel trucks, but it's actually looking at everything from how can we optimize the loading factor of trucks, because it's pointless to have an electric truck if it's half empty. We are looking also at the loading factor. We are looking at the usage of drivers, loading, offloading, etc. So that's just a short introduction to our company, and I'm very much looking forward to the discussions that we are going to have. Thank you.
Thank you very much to that nice input. Yeah, so I don't know if there are any questions on the Slido, but okay, I see no questions, but I have like a direct question, because we are talking about also the vehicle perspective and not only, yeah, how everything is good with automation, but also how the energy assumption due to computing, for example, also actually increases. So whether and to what extent do you see additional energy requirement for vehicles with increased automation?
I think this is absolutely relevant question to ask, because we have seen, for example, with implementations with blockchain previously, that is sometimes Bitcoin and other technologies, that has actually drastically increased energy consumption. What we see from our estimations and calculations that we have done with our vehicles is that because we are transporting very heavy loads, our trucks are carrying 10, 15, 20 tons of payload. The consumption from our sensors and cameras is really marginal. It's below 1%. That might be different if you're talking about much lighter vehicles. But in our case, because this is significantly heavy trucks, it is really not something that we should be worrying about. In addition, I just want to point out that CCAM is actually essential for having a efficient operation of these trucks. Why? Because if you look at eco-driving, and if you can avoid any stops, so to say, eco-driving in an electric vehicle, be it a car or be it a truck, can have a much more bigger impact on the energy consumption than for a ICE, as an example. On the ICE, driver can influence maybe 10 to 15% of fuel consumption. If you're driving an electric vehicle for fun, you might be burning easily 30–40% more energy per kilometer than what you would be actually getting if you are driving in a more eco mode, so to say. So this is why the technology the CCAM has a radical improvement potential, while the energy consumption is really marginal as we see it. Okay.
The end user perspective. And this is nicely linked to our next exercise, which is again a Slido, because Slido is great for interacting with all of you. We are doing a word cloud. Again, a word cloud. This time we ask you the question, which technologies or which technology elements do we need to jointly work on to enhance sustainability of CCAM applications? So it's really not only the technologies itself, but the elements of what do we need to address to jointly work to enhance sustainability of CCAM applications. Now we have eco-driving thanks to Željko just mentioning it. That's good. It works.
Quick uptake on that directly. Yeah, okay. I think we will come back to that question and also address what the outcome is after our next speaker. So with that, we come to Timo. He is the CTO of AstaZero, the proving ground of safe, automated and connected transportation system in Sweden. Timo is also a researcher at the Chalmers University of Technology with a focus on system and engineering. And yeah, he will enlighten us now about the sustainability consideration on testing, but also on the systemic approach for CCAM and the integration of the transport and the energy domain.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. And thanks again for a wonderful interaction. So, I don't know how many of you have heard about us. We're rather small. Is it coming back? Now it goes there. So, the world's first dedicated proving ground and research institute for active safety and automated driving. And as you see on the second statement there, we have the proving ground for the safe, sustainable automated transportation system. So as all Swedes basically focus on is always, we have it in our DNA, is sustainability and take care of our environment and nature. So that's kind of in everyone's DNA here. And a little bit just to give you a brief look at the company very shortly. So as again, research institute, non-profit. We founded this company in 2011 as a reaction on the automotive crisis, 2008-2009. A few years later, 2014, we opened the proving ground on time and on budget, very impressive. And since then, we have basically each year evolved and done some radical big changes to the proving ground. And now we are actually in the next stage where we are integrating energy storage into our proving ground system so that we can actually do what we are here at the CCAM and discussing today. So just to make a little bit brief what we do. I mean, we are providing the physical infrastructure with everything from rolling cars, and I mean, it's official that we work with Enride, for example, for many years. We have the air, we have waters, we have the confined areas, and we're actually seeing that the demand for working with automation within confined areas is really increasing a lot, which is also, again, giving us a big opportunity to optimize the whole system when it comes to energy. And then we have the virtual test beds, of course. We want to increase the work with simulations and verify as much as possible virtually. And then, of course, we have a connected infrastructure, which is it's one of a kind globally. So we have an experimental 5G network, and that's also why, for example, drones come to our proving ground and test how their connectivity works when it's latency or loss of package or something like that. Coming back to this picture, why I'm here today. I mean, if you look at the picture here, it's very simple. I think all of you see different things when you look at that picture, depending on your role in, and maybe also a role in a company. For example, you might see a vehicle there, and you might even focus on a specific system or a module in the vehicle. You might be an energy provider, you might look at storage, whatever form of storage it might be, or the grid, or whatever. So this was kind of a yesterday where we were a lot. And we have also seen it at our proving ground that the mental change and journey for many OEMs and participants and researchers has kind of gradually changed and gone from maybe a component or a subsystem of a system view to a higher hierarchy, to going to where I really want us to go, where we are partly today, more of a looking into the whole ecosystem. So what we see today is that many OEMs, for example, Enride, they're starting to have this system view of looking at the whole fleet of vehicles, as just mentioned before here, to how they can optimize the vehicle, how they behave, how they should charge, how much they should carry, how fast they should drive, and so on, and all these constraining requirements connected to their applications. We also see that many working with energy, they're kind of broadening their view and looking into how they could provide a better solution to the ones in need of storage, and maybe also feeding back energy to the grid. So, and that's why I want to talk about this. How can future mobility increase a sustainable transport solution? So, and here I think it's very important, as for example, as us as a research institute, that we take the whole ecosystem view on the problem. And of course, we need to collaborate around that in order to be able to solve that. But no one can do that alone. And if you remember what I showed you in the beginning, with the proving ground, we have actually set up an environment so we can start to explore this. We can have fleets of vehicles, whatever it is. We can soon plug them in different ways to charge them. And we can then start to optimize the whole system, and also collaborate with the society around us so we can feed back energy and be an energy storage for the society. And this can also be, of course, true for all actors in the society, depending on where you are and what you do. But I mean, as many households today, they have their solar panels and energy storage. so they can sell back energy. And so can we within the transportation institute, in the transportation segment start to do. We start to think, how can we be of a better benefit for the society? And there's of course a big and long journey to achieve that, but I think CCAM is a good kind of a tool to get this collaboration ongoing by gathering us and opening up maybe even calls so that we can in the long run apply for that and seek out other actors who are interested in collaborating and creating this new knowledge. So let me just show you a small example. So here we have an example of 5 vehicles fully automated in some way. We have 1 car, we have 2 target carriers, 1 bicyclist and 1 sphere, 2 drones. And even these ones, depending on their task, we can start to optimize their routes, what they carry, and when they should charge, so that the whole chain of deliveries can be optimized, so that the end customer get the right product to the right time. There we go. I think that's enough. And there's a small fun movie as well. There we go. And there you can see how the automated car comes. We have an automated drone, and all the objects here are automated. So nevertheless, what you see here, it doesn't really matter, but what you can understand if you look it from your point of view, whatever you deliver or whatever kind of products you provide, you can start to think of this kind of a hierarchy view and see how could you increase the sustainability and minimize your footprint so that the next generations can enjoy our world as well. Thanks.
Thank you very much for that. I'm a big fan of combining the different issues between the energy sector and the transport sector and make it like an overall approach, in my opinion, is the next way to go. Do we have any questions? At least one or so, maybe? I mean, I have a question also, but... So, in terms of energy efficiency and sustainability, what is the measured impact or difference with ICE trucks? I guess this is not necessarily towards you, but with and without drivers, some numbers. I guess this question might rather go to you, as I understand.
Good question, honestly. Again, it comes very much down to the eco-driving, because when we have our vehicles that are, this actually is referring to IC trucks. I don't know. We don't drive with any IC trucks, honestly. All of our trucks are fully battery electric. So.
Can you hear me? Yeah. So why I'm jumping in here, because I used to for many years work at a truck company, OEM. And I mean, one of the big drivers for moving towards automated vehicles is also, as you know, is a lack of drivers. So that's kind of one thing that drives automation. But also, as you mentioned earlier, an automated truck can be optimized way further than a human-driven vehicle.
If I can just reflect on this, one thing, and we see this especially a lot from our colleagues in the US, where they're working on automating trucks so that they can drive more or less East Coast to West Coast in shortest possible time. My personal, and this is not company statement, but my personal view is that action can actually be really detrimental from the environmental point of view, because it is actually good that IC trucks are limited to the driving time of the driver right now, because they cannot pollute as much. If you automate those trucks are going to be able to run more or less 24/7, equaling more pollution. This is also why, in my view, especially automation part of the CCAM should be focusing very much on zero-emission trucks and all vehicles, basically, because we don't want to optimize polluting vehicles so they can drive even more than they're doing today. That's personal view.
Yeah, so yeah, as you said, maybe in the break, then we go on. I have one more question to you and your presentation. So you discussed about optimizing also the links between energy and transport. So which are the requirements that need to be further considered to bring it to an optimization of those links? Also, for example, with the electricity grid.
Yeah, so what I see so far is that, thank you, is that, I mean, even to put up a big system, energy storage system connected to the grid is today not that given. It has a lot of challenges by itself. So I think to make it available on a kind of a commercial level, it needs, there's still a lot of work to be done, is that part we have seen. So actually we are trying to initiate some research projects so that we can have the kind of energy storage that we need for our vehicles, so it can be sustainable. And of course, we want to have green energy. Yeah.
Right, so it's working again. Can you hear me? Yes.
Yeah.
So the link to the energy system is brought into CCAM as well, which is obviously very good for this session, sustainability. It depends a lot where do we get the energy from and how do we get the energy to recharge, refuel, whatever powertrain we use. But the next speaker actually is looking at the system perspective. So it's connected very well to what you presented, that we don't look at the individual vehicles, but more at the traffic system perspective and what we get from the traffic system. And we are very happy. Actually, you do the introduction of Johanna, because I don't have the
No,
slides.
I think
I will introduce Johanna.
Yeah, I think it's
So,
your...
We are very happy to have a real expert on traffic systems and the effects that we get from sustainability from traffic system. We have Johanna Zanidaki from Ertico, Chief Innovation Officer, and she will tell us a lot and explain why it is so important to look at the complete traffic system and what we can get and what we should not forget. Thank you, Johanna.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, and how do I? Yeah. All right, before I go to the question that Stefan so kindly posed, let me give you some information about Ertico so you know who I am and where I'm coming from. Ertico is not a company, it's not a research center. We are an association, the association of ITS stakeholders. And these are our members, 120 plus. Public authorities, research centers, but also private sector, service providers, traffic industry, OEMs, users, and I'm forgetting probably suppliers and connectivity industry. As you see, the members of Ertico are working with or on ITS, and we have this responsibility to bring them all together around the table and discuss innovation on ITS, on intelligent transport systems. Which is this, intelligent transport systems? We are working on automated driving, of course, and drones that were mentioned, and data exchange that we're talking about all day, and traffic management, and all the other aspects of ITS. Because ITS is services, it's products, but it's also systems. And this is what my point is. Before I go there, just to give you an idea how we are organized with the membership and the projects that we are running under European and national funding, we are working on connected automated driving, clean and eco-mobility, urban mobility and mass, transport and logistics, and these are focus areas, we call them. But of course, we want all of this work to add to smart and sustainable mobility. For us, it's very important, the element of sustainability and the element of smartness, of course, because that's intelligent, the intelligent transport systems. And And this is where I'm going to try and contribute to the discussion. We have been working on traffic management through various projects at ERTICO, and we have set back in 2014 the innovation platform TM 2.0. Innovation platforms in ERTICO are not funded by the by EU funding. They attract also non-ERTICO members, so they are open to more stakeholders than members in ERTICO. And we decided to work on traffic management and how to bring the traffic management of 2014 into the next level, which would combine the public authorities and the service providers into one aligned, let's say, guidance and advice to the drivers, and bring it to the next level where you see this cooperation and collaboration based on trust. You see the alignment of information, so not one piece of information on the VMS, on the road, and something else in your car. And this cooperation ideally should have competitors working together with each other. This is competition, and in total collaboration with the public authorities. The public authorities, of course, have priorities and targets. And this is where the public authorities come with priorities such as geofencing or noise pollution, or what we are discussing today, you know, energy and sustainability and these kind of targets. And this is where, in the scheme of TM 2.0, which is the evolution of traffic management, you see the understanding of the members of TM 2.0. They are around 42, but more and more are really agreeing to this concept, that it is important to manage traffic, first of all, on the road, based on this collaboration, competition, and trust principles, following these principles or priorities that are set by the public authorities. And when I'm saying dialogue and collaboration, I really mean it. When a public authority wants to geofence an area or there's a target for sustainability, it has to, in the dialogue, explain it very well to the service providers that are cooperating and understand the needs and the losses potentially of this private sector and find the middle solution, or find a way that there is a sort of compensation. So this is the principle of the traffic management, and we have been discussing it for years, to the point that the 42 members of this innovation platform have, for the past 3 years, been discussing the mobility network management, which is very close to what Timo was mentioning, because we see the entire system, and not only the road-based traffic, but the entire mobility with all its modes integrated in a system where we try and we strive to find balance. Because when you are directing traffic on the road on one side, or you take some measures and so on, this has a spillover effect on other modes. If you don't have the common operational picture to see what is happening in the entire network, how can you ensure sustainability and the optimal use of energy, the connection to the grid, the eco-driving, and all these things that we are talking about today? So that was, I hope, very fast my introduction to ERTICO and our work. Thank you.
So one direct question I have to ask it, Johanna. There has been a little bit of confusion with the taxonomy and with the influence of traffic management or ITS. How do you see that? Is it being solved?
I've been working on this all weekend, actually, because there was a public consultation with a deadline of today, and we decided to submit a short text, as you can imagine, a page and a half, but it's really, the taxonomy regulation is really difficult to read and digest and understand. I'm not going to nag more about it. I want to say that it is a green labeling of activities that the Commission has decided to kind of classify in an annex where it's mentioning all the activities, and ideally everything should be there. Initially, ITS was not there. then ITS is mentioned somehow in the frequently asked questions, which is not as legally powerful as it would have been if it was in the text, but I'm not going to go the legal way, although I'm a lawyer. What I want to say is that although ITS and this power to decarbonize and digitize and decarbonize transport and help with the greening of transport and the entire system is recognized by many publications, the Green Deal, the Sustainability Strategy, and so on. This specific piece of legislation, the taxonomy, is seeing the parts of ITS. So the engineering part, the IoT part, the, I don't know, AI part, and it fails to see the power of ITS as a tool for the management of the entire system and the entire network. And therefore, it doesn't give recognition to traffic management, which is not only products and services, it's also infrastructure, it's people, it's actions, it's measures. So it fails to do that, and therefore there's a danger of ITS not being seen, or traffic management and many ITS applications not being seen green enough if they're missing from the annex and the legislation, and therefore not be able to receive public funding, have a good place in the public procurement, and as well in the entire share market, and so on and so forth. So it is a legal issue, but it's also lack of alignment between the publications and the policies of the different DGs. That's my short answer.
Not so short, but good, and very much linked to our next speaker, our international guest, William. Please.
Yeah, so our next guest, William Riggs from the University of San Francisco, will give us a little bit more of an international perspective, also on the traffic management. So he's a professor and program director at the University of San Francisco School of Management. He also does some consulting and advising in different areas of CCAM, and also is a very active publisher. I want to specially mention the book End of the Road, Reimagine the Street as the Heart of the City. Billy is also pretty much focused on the CCAM area in the business and technical operation, travel behavior and planning, as well as policy, environmental policies. So Billy, tell us a little bit more of your observations also from an international perspective, please.
Thank you for welcoming me. I appreciate it. And I'll go from the lawyer to the professor. It's pretty dangerous in the most awkward room in the world. Thank you. I lead an initiative called Autonomous Vehicles in the City as a professor at University of San Francisco, and wear a number of different hats, and have a background as both an engineer and city planner. And for those of my Dutch colleagues here, I used to work for the US DOT in a Coast Guard capacity, because the Coast Guard used to be a part of the Department of Transportation, and also sit on a number of Transportation Research Board committees. One thing I won't talk about right now is a lot of my work in rider behavior as a part of a research rider pilot with cruise automation. But I want to anchor to that because I think I'll refer to a couple things over a series of slides that infer that rides are shared. So we've been having thousands of students riding in cruise autonomous vehicles that you heard Andre Engelvik talk about earlier today. And so clearly we have autonomous platforms that are running in San Francisco that are, in fact, level 4, Ubers without a driver. And I think what we're seeing is that you can have this autonomous and electric platform, and you can see that we're seeing as much as 50% of rides are shared with more than 2 people. and that the primary, about 56% of rides actually don't supplant walking, cycling, or transit. They're actually derived specifically from people that would otherwise ride in their own vehicles or they would ride in rideshare. So we won't give that statistic, but I want to anchor to that because I think, tearing off the last presentation, there are a lot of things that municipalities can do to own their network and particularly own the infrastructure. And I don't mean digital infrastructure. I think I'd love to have a conversation about how much connectivity is required for said vehicles and whether or not we end up with stranded assets going into the future. So I want to say, maybe in a little different counterpoint to my colleague Jane Lappin said this morning, that cities are empowered and local governments are empowered because they own their streets. So that said, is there a clicker? Yeah, yes. Thank you. In California particularly, but US-wide, we're seeing really this electric revolution, and we're seeing many of the top leading AV providers pursue this vision of shared, autonomous, and electric. And I think that's a unique distinction that I think I want to underscore. We're seeing, particularly in California, a vast proliferation of EV sales. We have a goal of eliminating fossil fuel-based vehicles by 2035. And that's coupled with a renewable energy portfolio that is really providing kind of the backbone of making sure that fuel is sustainable. Whether or not our grid is intelligent, particularly as intelligent as many of you that may be from the Nordic countries, that is in question, and I think I want to come back to that. But I want to also come back to the fact that infrastructure is not just transportation infrastructure. We're seeing a lot of this automated vehicle ride sharing be coupled with new forms of development. And I think that's really important in the context of the European sump process to really emphasize that you can't talk transportation without talking housing and without talking the relationship between jobs and housing. But these new platforms are about more than the car, and they're really about this idea of network optimization. So I want to dive a little deeper there with this idea that the actual way we design our grid actually matters. And it matters because as we pursue many of these shared vehicles, and the quiz I always give here is which of these vehicles is real and on the road today? None of them. Yes, that is and then the closest to reality is in the top left quadrant. It's a vehicle that's under production. It is actually supposed to be hitting the streets in Austin, Texas over the next few weeks, the Cruise Origin. In the right quadrant, you see top right, that's the Alphabet or Waymo Zeekr, and that's a mystery in terms of when that will be available. But I want to emphasize, you see these companies, and you've seen all the dialogue about these robo-taxis going around in San Francisco, quote unquote, causing all kinds of trouble. We can debate the trouble. I would love that debate. But they are corner cases, and it's important to emphasize each one of these companies is pursuing a shared solution. So what does that mean to our network when we have shared vehicles and companies that own the asset, they own the fleet, so they want to maximize the number of miles they drive with maximal people in those vehicles, increasing not VKT, PKT, people kilometers traveled. And so that actually entails us rethinking this idea that, Robert Severo was my PhD advisor, and he used to talk about this idea of TODs being these concentric rings around heavy rail, high capacity transit. But we really have started, and this is in the Silicon Valley, with a radical plan of, okay, let's stop thinking about these priority areas. Let's think about priority networks. Let's think about this idea of priority transit networks and open up housing opportunity, deal with housing shortage by new forms of transportation. And it's also about, and I really appreciated the prior conversations and the question that was asked, which is how much will our networks optimize our networks, whether or not it's with physical design or connectivity, influence GHG. So My colleague Jeff Boeing and I are super nerds, and we do a lot of simulation. He's at University of Southern California, so we do a lot of simulation on different street grid patterns in San Francisco. And this is important because we're seeing a lot of fleet vehicles drive over and over again in continual circulation on the network, making trips. There's about 1 million trips in the city of San Francisco today, not unlike many cities around the country. But when you see that, when you have an inefficient network, it's actually inefficient or surplus vehicle kilometers traveled. And so what I'm going to show now is a wonky table. But what I'm going to emphasize here is this idea in the center, in each of these, this idea of survey-derived trips or random trips. Those are just different ideas of how do we make trips in the city. But in each of these scenarios, what we've done is we said, okay, in the real network versus an idealized network, how much extra kilometers are we putting on the road when we don't optimize our networks? When we actually have, and we were particularly interested in one-way streets where people drive around the block multiple times to get to their destination, which is a very common American phenomenon, multi-lane one-way streets. And so to just provide you with a little nugget, a lot of you said 15%, 10% on that last survey in terms of GHG and excess capacity on our roads that we could eliminate through connectivity. Here we're saying we can save 8% just through civil design, just through realigning our roads and making our networks perform like networks, not like freeways. So, you know, I think the takeaway here is streets matter, but we haven't incentivized both a vehicle platform incentive, and this is a very U.S., I mean, this is a U.S. perspective. We're seeing this collapsing into lightweight, different types of transit, this idea of maximizing the number of people in vehicle, but also thinking in new ways about roadways. And that can be even more radical. And I shout out to some of the stuff that's happened in Paris with Carlos Moreno in the 15-minute city. But even if we roll back in what happened in Barcelona a couple years, where you're seeing this street grid network as opportunity reframe what a road can be, and that actually a network doesn't have to be every single street that exists today. So colleagues from University of Oregon and I really have thought about this idea of street deconstruction. And in automation, and so we are really looking in the US about maybe rewinding this idea of, does a street have to have the parking? Does it have to have as wide of lanes? And do we have to actually think about streets as actually being for one purpose? And those are perhaps not as provocative here in Europe, and maybe we're learning from you, but I think it's actually something where we can co-evolve knowledge together. And so we kind of devolved this idea of the street in radical ways. There are questions about curbs. There are questions from law enforcement and fire officials about if you can actually get to this solution, and whether or not you can, for example, operate in a kind of a von Erf idea with an automated vehicle and mixed flow. Hint, you can. But I think there's an opportunity also to kind of really reframe what you can do with streets and roads from an infrastructure standpoint. This is the end of my presentation.
So we will check Slido right away if we have some questions for Billy. I have an immediate question. Have you considered question, whenever there is already public transport in place, isn't then automated taxi fleets just competing with that public transport? And when you get out people from the metro inside the taxi, then maybe nothing is saved. The second question, can we afford to wait if we have rebuilt the cities to save the climate and the planet? Is it enough time to just say, okay, yeah, we build the new networks? Will it help us? Will it save us?
Well, can we do one question first and then the second question? So first off, everybody here didn't get the benefit of my presentation yesterday, so there's about an hour-long presentation that actually is a gap here, but. The long short of it is you have to design complementary networks, but it's not a one-for-one binary relationship, and you have to treat robotaxis as one tool. And I think what you have to remember is automation is not a one-size-fits-all solution. You actually have to be intentional. You have to design intentionally, but you also have to think about, and the funny part is, private sector is thinking about this too. They want business models that work. So this is where you really have to come together between public and private entities and figure out business models that serve both the public and the public good, but also that are fiscally sustainable. And the point I want to make about fiscal sustainability is we have to be honest that public transit is on life support. It cannot sustain itself financially into the future. And I think an evolution in terms of how we think about transport finance is probably should be one of those things that is more discussed in the CCAM world that is not. We need economically viable models. Can I just avoid the second question until later? Because I feel like I don't want to monopolize the conversation.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. As we've just seen on the screen 1 second ago, we launched another Slido poll on the question of how much CO2, wait, there we have it again, how much CO2 could be saved.
I think I've biased the results, by the way.
Yeah, I agree. That actually has happened, I guess. Wait, but you were talking more on the number of networks.
Yeah, I was doing civil design, so I don't think that takes into account the kind of the connectivity. And maybe I have a question when we get to discussion about kind of how much connectivity is necessary to get the gains of automation.
Well, yeah, great question. However, on that traffic management approach, well, can we go back to that? So, yeah, we get some responses. Well, so, yeah, maybe one of you, Billy, Joanna, maybe you can react on that.
Oh, Billy did already, so Joanna, your turn.
Well, I don't have the precise numbers and the percentage, but this is very much linked to what it was discussed before also by Željko on eco-driving and eco-routing and how this dynamic traffic management, real-time information to the drivers from the public authorities via the service providers can really save the careless spending of energy. And that's one. The second is how you, if we connect it to the grid discussion, how you can find places where you can charge your vehicle and actually without arriving, book and charge and do all that even before you arrive to the charging stations. So these are some of the uses of dynamic traffic management as it relates to energy. They just come to my mind. But specific percentage, I don't have to give you.
Yeah, but thank you very much. I guess we kind of agree that it will for sure be some beneficial towards the energy efficiency and the saving. So also maybe a quick follow-up question on that. So if we agree it will be, like having a positive effect on sustainability, is environmental traffic management or some ideas like that, is that already like a service? A service that is provided by the industry in the market or should be coming very soon?
Yeah, it is. So environmental traffic management and this kind of services and apps are provided by the traffic industry and service providers to public authorities that want to that have decided to prioritize on their sustainability policies. They're out there in the market, but we also see it every day. The green waves, the glossas, the in-vehicle, signaling, where you don't really need to have in the infrastructure traffic lights, but you have all the information coming in your car, and this is very much through the network and the connectivity, taking into account what is happening real time with the traffic situation, and it allows you to go on to follow a specific speed and pass intersections without really needing the presence of the infrastructure. Yeah.
And the next speaker is Dr. Laia Paget. He's Executive and Research Manager at CARNET in Spain. And CARNET is a cooperative automotive research network founded by SEAT, Volkswagen Group Innovation, and the Technical University of Catalonia, Barcelona Tech, and additional public partners. After her studies in Toulouse in California, she worked in the automotive sector in the US, in Spain, and in Germany. And the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Just to remind that we are in the most important session, but I have the luck to be the last one and to be after so an exciting presentation, so I'll do my best so that you don't fall asleep. Yes, CARNET is an open innovation hub started back in 2015 together with SEAT, Volkswagen Research at the time, Volkswagen Group Innovation today, and the Technical University in Catalonia based in Barcelona. Why did they found this open innovation network? Because they saw at that time that the challenges that the automotive industry had, not only because of traffic management, that its implementation, I completely agree. I don't know if we will see it in our future. Not only this, but the car itself and all the stakeholders that are behind had great challenges that they cannot solve together or alone, and they need to solve it together with other stakeholders. And next slide, please. I don't know who is. I have to. Here? Okay, sorry. Yeah, so our mission is to shape the future of the automation, mobility and transportation, as I said, from a very cooperative way. And I don't want to enter into the details, but what do we do in a concrete way? Because it's difficult to see and to explain what we do every day when we go to work. And we organize our actions, our services to our partners in 4 transversal activities that you see here. First of all, it's education. So training and education to train these future talents that have to face the future of these factories, that it's not easy. We are going to an electrification, we are going to new vehicles, we are now going to new connectivity, and factories are full with mechanical engineers. So how do we have to do this from the public sector to train these people so that I would also speak of the politics and the way of working is different. And this is a big challenge that we have as an industry today, not in the future, but today. Second, and most important in terms of funding and activity, cooperative research. We are very active in European projects, national projects, etc., with our partners, and as ERTICO as well, with partners that are not ours. We are open to collaborations and synergies. We talked about synergies a lot today, and we do all kinds of projects in sustainability, electrification, etc., and the topics that we talked today. Networking, very big and very important today. And last but not least, this is today the one that is growing the fastest. We do technological scouting for our OEMs and our partners. This is a new way of working because, of course, we have all these NDAs, etc. But this activity or this link between innovation done in startups, in another way of thinking, another way of working, and how we get this information into a big company such as SEAT or Volkswagen, it's still a challenge, and we are working in this direction. And I repeat, this is growing a lot. There is a lot of interest. Who are our partners? You have them here. We have the automotive ones that are suppliers. We have operators, all these mobility operators, local operators that want to innovate, that see that just operating their trains, operating their buses is not enough, that they need to include this innovation. We have academic partners, not only the UPC, institutional, so public entities that want to be part of this ecosystem, and data-related companies, because traffic management seen as a whole, I emphasize that it's very, very important. And actually, William, you made me feel very young because I did my PhD in traffic management in California. And when you were talking in this way, I went back to my past. And I'm going to finish by talking about one project that is that links what we are talking today here: the sustainability, electrification, autonomous driving, but very important, to test this in cities. And what William was saying, which one of these vehicles is on the streets? This vehicle was in the streets, will continue to be in the streets, and we are working to have it commercial in the future. This is a last mile delivery robot that is autonomous, is electric, that has been developed and researched for the last actually overall 6 years. It's amazing how long it takes, but it started as something very, very confidential, and it started going step by step. And with a lot of work and a lot of hours, we moved forward to, with European funding, do pilots in 3 European cities last year, one in Barcelona, the other in Hamburg in Germany, and the other in Debrecen, that is a city in Hungary. And next year we are piloting again it next to Wolfsburg in Braunschweig. And right now we have 2 of them, and we are pushing over through a startup that will go more commercially and move forward. So this is linked maybe also to the previous session that had to do with all this path from an idea to research to implementation and at the end to commercialization, and each one has its role. But I wanted to show to you these projects just to finish as an example of what we do at Carnet. So thank you very much, and that's all.
So, Naya, just one question. You're working a lot with cities in the framework of Carnet and mobility. How much do you see that cities are already taking measures? How much are they attentive to the mobility and the transportation? And maybe a second question, if you allow, how much are the interaction between those that are living outside of the cities that have to travel into the cities and that usually have to take the car because there is no other transportation in their vicinity available? How is this problem being addressed within the cities in the projects? Maybe do you...
Well, I think that these are 3 questions. If we do work with cities, yes, a lot. But the challenges that we want to solve and that we are working on, they see it from another angle. It's not their day-to-day topics. Usually a mobility department has the day, the week and the month full with daily issues, and to start innovating together and so on, it's a mindset that needs a lot of work and needs a lot of understanding and cooperation. I think that we are improving, and actually from the European Commission there are these projects that tend to work together in the same table, and one of a big example is this missions program that we talked about this morning, that we have been active and hopefully will get some projects. But we need this cooperation and we need these synergies, because at the end what we do, what we research, what we think as ideas that at the end need to be used. If not, we need this implementation. So, and it goes through the cities, and we repeated it today that these are the ones that are empowered to do that. So this was the first question. The second question, what do we do with people that live outside the city and come in the city? We do have some projects in terms of traffic management, seen as a global thing, one of them with traffic toll management, which impacts in the demand. And at the end, these are the kind of issues that are politically not easy to implement. And actually traffic management research, there are some results that cannot be implemented because of politics, and this is the beauty of traffic. As I always say that we are trying to optimize a system, but we are not electrons. We are not, changing a everybody does not do the same, because there is this choice and this model choice. So we are working in tolls, we are working in other traffic management schemes to impact in this demand, but we have to give as a society other alternatives, and this is investment, and we do our small part of it, but it's a big deal. I think that these were there were 3 questions and I only answered 2, but I think maybe it's enough. We can talk later. Thanks.
Yes, thank you very much. I think with this, and yeah, now we heard a lot about the measures of cities already, but we're discussing a lot on the CCAM technologies, and with this, I think it's like a good transition to the panel discussion, and maybe also to launch another poll to see which additional challenges, so beside the technological points we were already discussing now, we need to address to achieve sustainable transport future. And I also want to remind you again, please feel free if you have any questions, either put them on the Slido or also here in the room, please feel free now in the upcoming panel discussion to also raise your hand and please interactively participate in the discussion. So if we have the poll, maybe, that would be lovely. Perfect. So we see infrastructure, housing, behavioral change, circular economy, very good point. Also one that was like on my agenda to introduce into the panel discussion. So yeah, with this and the poll, I would like to ask the speakers, anyone who wants to go first, any comments on that? Yeah, please.
So I sent real-time traffic information and data sharing, and it's something that we have been discussing all day, and not today only, for years. We are talking about cooperation, real-time traffic information and data sharing for years. We know that we should be working together, and yet we have not managed yet to do it. And I think this is a challenge that we should keep on working on. And, you know, the solution, as I see it, to that is that we should not only repeat what we are saying over and over again, although it works, but okay, we should possibly be more receptive to the point that the other side is making. So if we're talking about public authorities and the companies, let's be more open, because what I find that happens in our meetings is that we all come, we repeat the same thing, but yet we cannot listen to what others are saying. So this is also very much linked to awareness. It's very much linked to a campaign that we should be all launching, showing the benefits or the potential benefits that are coming from this cooperation and this and automation. And with that, of course, the publicizing or making more understandable and digestible the results of the projects that we are running. Because we are running these projects at European level, we disseminate or we submit these long deliverables and reports of pages and pages. Nobody reads them. And we are talking about public engagement, understanding and awareness, and they will not read with these deliverables and these reports. So we should change, and the Commission should also rethink on the deliverables and the format that they have when we are talking about projects and piloting and so on and so forth.
I was inspired by William's speech, like everybody else, I think. One thing that he highlighted that I recognize very much from our daily work is this: it is not a replacement of one for one. You know, starting with our electric trucks. Most of the people, when they're thinking about electric trucks, and if you have been running diesel for a number of years, you're going to say, well, you know, you cannot run 1,000 kilometers on an electric truck. It's too short. It's too expensive. They do cost 2 or 3 times more than diesel trucks. The charging is a pain, etc., etc. So really what is needed, even just to go electric, and then there's next step also to go autonomous, and of course all of time digital as well. You really need to rethink the overall operations. I saw there was one question in the Slido. If, for example, the transport times are going to be affected, are we going to be faster or slower with the autonomous vehicles, basically? It depends very much from case to case. This is really a transition where you really have to work with all of the stakeholders, the transport buyers, the people on the ground, We are working a lot with warehouse managers that are sending goods, receiving goods, etc. It is a transformation. And the biggest mistake that I see in this field is everybody is expecting, but this is going to be one for one. I want my electric and in future autonomous truck to do exactly what I'm doing today with my diesel truck. And we know that those operations that we have today, even if we remove the diesel from the equation, we know that our logistics operations are highly inefficient. So this is really a possibility for all of us in logistics, but I also think in passenger transport as well, to rethink how do we do the transport so that we can not only address the propulsion in itself, but we also address all of the other challenges and shortcomings that we have in our transport sector today.
I would like to maybe, ask the question about, because you mentioned the user and the end user perspective, and I think we all agree that it all depends very much how much we can take the society with us in buying into new technologies, being CCAM, being electrification, and convince them. My question to all of you speakers would be, how are we actually able to make sure that we are not just addressing the 30–40%, but that we get the entire, because we need the 100% to be part of this journey. Because if we just say, okay, yeah, maybe the 30–40% we can leave, then we will not get there. So we need to be convincing.
I mean, can I start with that one? Because I think there's a question back to you. Do we over-assume that they need convincing? And so my starting point was I went to a San Francisco Giants baseball game, you know, that other game that doesn't exist outside of the US. And I fortunately have access to these amazing robo-taxis. And so me and my two kids, after the game, called up a shared autonomous electric taxi. And we took a very pleasant car that drove itself home to our place in San Francisco, a very dense urban environment. My kids were oblivious. They're 10 and 12. They don't need convincing that this is the future. They went straight to the back of the seats and took quizzes about how to make a martini. Very inappropriate, by the way. But the point being, you know, I think about this a lot, and I've been sitting here staring at this poll, perplexed, because I sit here and I think, well, all this, we have to remember the why. Why are we doing this? And many times it's not as much about changing behavior, it's changing in the environment that induces the behavior. And so it's creating the infrastructure, both the housing, the job location, and the transit infrastructure that then shapes, I mean, there's so much behavioral stuff that people have put in here, but a lot of people, you have to remember, have been historically pushed into places where they don't have access. And, you know, maybe not so much in dense European cities, but I've traveled enough and I've been to enough places in your wonderful continent to know that there's marginalization of vulnerable communities in this continent as well. And so I see, we talked about labor earlier, you know, labor is awesome in terms of alleviating, you know, job shortages for logistics. But if I can be the one that facilitates an autonomous ride that is reliable and convenient for someone to access transit so they don't lose their job because the bus was late, man, my career will be a success.
Maybe I can comment a little bit to what you, Willem, said and Seiko. I think many of the things we don't really have to influence people. We just need to kind of rethink a little bit how we do things. Of course, it's a very simple question and very obvious, but I mean, if we hook on to the transport solution, I don't think we need to maybe transport in the same way, because we have to think this, I mean, autonomous vehicles and transports are a fully different type of an animal. So that also behaves in a different way. So we need to rethink how we can cope to how that system can work with us together in a different way, because we can work in a totally different and more efficient way. So I think, as you say, anyway, I think to jump in a fully autonomous taxi in a few years will be totally normal. But I think in many cases we need to rethink and re-understand, and maybe also lift up the important questions and what's most important for all of us. And it's not maybe to get the hamburger in 5 minutes or something.
Maybe we check Slido if we have further questions from the audience.
While we're checking that, one thing I want to say is, I do a lot of work these days in blockchain finance and get laughed out of the room, but we think about highly centralized finance of projects. And I do think we have an opportunity now to think about decentralized finance in a different way. And of course, there's been some controversy over that, but centralized government has caused a lot of distrust in government. And I think there's an opportunity with distributed finance, distributed technology that allows for us to rethink how we deliver and finance transportation infrastructure. And I think somebody mentioned blockchain in their presentation. It's fantastic to underscore and allow possibility there. So I want to highlight that.
Timo, what are some of the problems associated with optimization as systems get more complex?
I think one important aspect is interaction. I mean, to have interfaces which actually work together in an appropriate way. I mean, now we talk both technical point of view and a human point of view. So I think it's kind of a challenging from many angles, and I think also to be able to look at it from a point where you actually look at the most important questions is also very difficult to prioritize, because depending on who you talk to, the different priorities are, difficult to prioritize.
Well, another general question, I guess. What are the methods standardized to evaluate energy savings compared to a scenario of reference of an automated mobility service? Anybody on that? Oh, sorry. Maybe not.
I don't know if it helps, but from our robot, we did a life cycle analysis and we did not find any standards. So it's published, and if anyone wants it, I can give the reference, but for these vehicles in particular, we could not find them. So well, an opportunity for research, maybe.
I think the real answer is that we don't have enough data to have the answer, and there are no methods. So in San Francisco, the biggest elephant in the room with a lot of these pilots is nobody really knows the deadhead miles right now for any type of robotaxi or logistic fleet. We're guessing, but because the operations aren't at scale, we don't totally know. Some of my data suggests that it's less than rideshare for these smaller experiments. But this gets to like distributed energy storage, broader network optimization, broader fleet optimization that could be benefit through even ADAS, more ADAS connectivity. So I think the short answer there is we don't know, but we hope we know in the future.
And I can add to that as well. I mean, we are quite far ahead out, so to say, in the frontier of what is existing today. So even when we are looking at estimating CO2 emissions saving from our electric trucks, we see that up to now, there's not been any standards to how do you actually do that. It was up to every company to calculate on their own. Basically, we do have in the logistics sector, we have a GLEC, Global Low Emissions Council, that is kind of compare emissions from across the different modes of transport. So how much do you, by sending this package or a ton of goods via air, via rail, via truck, etc., you can make that comparison. But the electric trucks are quite new for them as well. So we are working together with founders of the GLEC framework to include, okay, so what happens with the electric trucks? Of course, you have zero tailpipe emissions, But everybody knows that's not the whole truth. You also have life cycle emissions, you also have the energy production. So how do we find a good way to account that in a good way? And we are working also towards development of a standard on that side. And this is electrification, and of course automation is even further out, so we have even less knowledge on that side.
Shelko, then I would do some advertisement of some EUCAD work. So EUCAD did some research with the Joint Research Center in Konkawi on well-to-wheel analysis. And in our last version, the version 5, we included heavy-duty trucks. And we as well have their comparison with electrification and engines. So that is worth reading. And we are extending it to life cycle analysis right now, which is, of course, very much the thing we need to do. And we need to see in a more circular context, which was mentioned somewhere there.
Before,
and
yeah.
it is something that we wanted to touch upon
Exactly.
as well.
This is true. We also have one specific question on that, because it was also mentioned as like a big topic, circular economy. So what would be the potential or also the challenges, so one or the other side, of like large scale introduction also from like circularity into the automotive or CCAM world? Anybody?
Well, I wouldn't know what to say about CCAM world in itself. I mean, from our side, we are looking, for example, into batteries of all of our electric trucks. We are already working on solutions where we are going to, in the future, when our truck batteries are not able to perform anymore, that are good enough for logistic purposes, to reuse those batteries at the charging stations, basically, and to have the backup power. So to utilize it fully. When it comes to CCAM part, I'm not fully sure what we can do with the CCAM.
I mean, I was not, CCAM is a little bit too broad, but CCAM also has like vehicles, automotive parts, and so on. And there's like a lot of material that should be going in the cycle and not, being freshly done.
And maybe there is a lot of energy demand associated with it. If we calculate that and do all the cities renew the networks, do we calculate, how do we facilitate, how do we find the right balance of how do we make the change, how we do transform, but how do we factor all the factors in it?
Yeah, well, if I can also make another comment, because right now I have the feeling there's a lot of analysis, as we said, like on the emissions and on the efficiency, but mainly like related to the use of the vehicles and to, how can we optimize this? How can we then like, use less energy? But actually the vehicles and the parts is a little bit, which is like less considered so far. And then I think in that regard, like the circular economy plays like a bigger, now you can go.
I didn't realize it worked like that. Sorry. So you can yell at one another. Just like, I actually am glad you brought that up because I think the materiality, the battery recycling dialogue gets kind of like the battery life cycle dialogue gets hijacks kind of the full life cycle materials of the vehicle. And I think if you step back from the question a little bit, there's a bigger dialogue about OEM addiction to larger vehicle platforms that are in the wrong direction of cities. And you see, it's interesting that Cruise, who has been a research partner of mine, has now eliminated the Chevy Bolt, which is their smallest vehicle platform, and is now, probably in the future going to sell more Hummers than Bolts. And you see, I unfortunately saw the BMW vehicle out front, and you see the electric platforms getting bigger and bigger and more inefficient. And I think that's the wrong, if I'm just going to call a spade, OEMs are going the opposite direction, and they have an incentive to go the opposite direction because there's more premium on those vehicles, but it's inconsistent with, I think, the civic values, or at least what we are articulating as civic values. And if the public wants those vehicles, fine, maybe we're out of line with what are our public values. But I think there's a big identity crisis with regard to vehicle manufacturing from a material standpoint.
At the same time, you can transport more people in a bigger vehicle, as we know when we look at buses. So, and that comes back to what you said on how if you use it shared or in a fleet or whatever. Yeah. So, well, but that I would like to touch on something that we discussed a little bit today in the panel discussions on international collaboration. And what we learn from what is happening in the US and why it's not happening in Oslo, for example. What is the reason why some things are materializing, some companies are investing huge amount of monies in technologies, and others not, and why are decisions being made that, for example, it's easier in San Francisco than in Oslo? To bring again the example, what could be, and William, I would ask you to take maybe the last answer here. Maybe we start first with the European answers, but I would be happy to hear what is it that makes Europe different from the US when it comes to these large-scale demonstration projects?
So, of course, we all heard Jane talking about the market-driven approach, and in the US. And the difference with Europe is that this dialogue that the Commission is implementing with the dialogue with the stakeholders, the synergies with the CCAM, PPP, and the 2.0, and so on, and this effort from the part of the decision makers, let's say, the policy makers, to co-create with the stakeholders so that everyone is equally engaged. That is the difference. And we see that at ERTICO, most of our projects, they have either a pilot or another form of international cooperation with South Korea, the US, and other international partners. And we are testing the technologies and everything is fine. But when we're talking about business models and governance, there's a big difference. Because you either have these situations where the government has all the power and just imposes, or the market has all the power and just imposes. And the European framework of cooperation is pretty unique and probably the best.
Well, I completely agree with her, but the role of the state is very different in the US and in Europe, and this is exactly your point. If it's the best or not, I guess there is an open discussion that takes months, but the role or the expectations of a citizen, of an European citizen and an American citizen of their state and their cities and their government is very different. And especially if we compare Norway, which is highly regulated, and people are happy with that, and compared to the America, there are different levels in Europe, and maybe Norway is one of the ones that is further away from the US, probably. So, yeah.
Well, I would say we are one of very few European CCM platforms, not platforms, that vehicles. So to say that has started in Sweden in our case, but we are driving also in the US. And why did we go to the US? Well, for several reasons. It's a big market, big transport market for one. Second, there's also a lot of investments, and if you really want to be seen as a serious player by the venture capital and investors, you need to be also present in the US. So these are two markets, Europe and USA, where we are driving today. Now, what goes in addition into a decision to establish yourself somewhere? Investment into US was a strategic one, and we need to establish a huge team for operations. Now, if you go to any other parts of the world, if you go to any new country, as Jane was mentioning this morning, you also need to consider that all of these vehicles, Cruise, Waymo, whoever, us, etc., these are vehicles that still need to have support from engineers from time to time. And it's not easy just to kind of drop them off on the other side of the planet and forget about them. They are going to be managing everything yourself. Still, we are in operations mode, and we need to have people that are operating, that are upgrading these vehicles, et cetera, which is a huge logistics challenge as well. That should not be underestimated. This is also why even Waymo, that probably has more money than many of us here together, is not able to commit to going, for example, or let's just go to Oslo and implement our fleets there. So I think, you know, there are multiple reasons why people are establishing themselves in the US. Europe is more risk averse in general European countries, while the US is also a little bit more, hey, come here, try it out, do your best, and let's see how it goes. And there are pros and cons with both approaches, basically. But there are different reasons why we establish ourselves in different regions, and I would say you cannot say one is better than the other.
I think my perspective is going to be much different than everybody else's. So 2 clear reasons. First, technical. The second, policy related. European OEMs have tried to actually conquer automation through ADAS. American innovators in this space have tried to cover automation through AI. When you start as a software company, you have built-in localization and built-in sensor fusion from the start. When you start trying to actually build in ADAS from a vehicle manufacturing standpoint, you're using a build-up approach that tries to sprinkle on advanced driving assist features, but doesn't actually consider the hardware upgrades required to do the advanced driving functions. So I think there's some fundamental technological limitations to the approach that actually slow the innovation from European OEMs down, because I think it'd be a much different conversation if BMW and Mercedes hasn't closed up their innovation lab in the Silicon Valley, and they're gone now. And so I think if there was an OEM, and I know that Mobileye has their experiment with BMW in Munich, so I know there's stuff happening behind closed doors, but it's not as far along as what's happening. And there's technical reasons why, and there's no reason why Europe couldn't be as far further ahead. One of the reasons you don't see US companies here has nothing more to do than policy fragmentation. And Jane said something very quickly this morning, said preemption. And preemption is not a bad thing, but it is a regulatory authority that higher levels of government have over local government. When we see policy or AV deployments here in EU, not only do they have to comply with EU and member nation regulations, many times they have to comply with provincial and city regulations from a reporting and a testing standpoint. And there's not a company that really wants to pallet that level of regulatory scrutiny that is operating already in an environment where the only regulators are at the state and the federal level, so at higher levels of regulation. So quite simply, Cruise and Waymo can operate their roads, for example, throughout California without having to reframe their software stack. They can have a generalized stack across the state that complies with driving policy, that complies with general driving regulations without having to go through that. Yes, they have to ask permission, but they don't have to ask permission for the local government. So it's a much simpler regulatory process. But I will emphasize one last thing, is that does not leave cities powerless. And that's why I really anchored my presentation to this idea of roads and networks. Cities still control speeds, they control their right-of-way, they control their zoning, they control their parking, they control their signalization, they control their traffic control devices. So they have a lot of power, and I think it's important to recognize that they're not powerless. They have a different kind of power, and they still have a voice in the regulatory process, but it's not the licensing or driving function.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think we are slowly coming to the end of the session. So I have one last question to all of you, or better to say like a wish list. So if you had one wish, which aspect should be further brought more into focus or should be further addressed towards, on our way towards more sustainable transportation?
The magic wand question.
Exactly.
Famous at the end of a panel discussion.
So,
Okay, start with the shy one. So I think, we don't need any further support on technologies. I think we are in operations. What is very important for scaling is actually the business case. And I think it was our colleagues from Volvo this morning in the panel discussion that were talking very much about business case. We see business case in those operations where we are running right now. That's not a problem. But if you are going to scale across the entire Europe, across the US, etc., there are two things that need to come into place. And then I'm talking about CCAM, but also our, thinking about that we are fully electric from our side. On one side, there needs to be a easier access to financing, especially here in Europe. And when you're speaking with players such as like investment banks here in Europe, etc., it's just taking ages to make the progress because we are so slow and bureaucratic sometimes in Europe. So I think we can speed up on financing from the European side. On the other side, we also need to take the right costs for all of the emissions and everything. I just saw last week that the German government has decided to increase the toll for heavy-duty vehicles, road tolls. And part of that increase of the road tolls is going to be €200 per ton CO2 price. So this is going to ramp up the transport costs quite significantly and making a business case for anybody running with zero-emission vehicles, in this case trucks, much better. So I think, make it easier to incentivize financially as well those that are making the change, not only us, but everybody else who is ready to go zero emission as an example, but also in implementing CCAM as a part of that. And also make those that are not ready to take that step pay the full price of pollution, etc., which we are not doing today.
I used to work with Željko, and I always told him in Nertico, and I always told him that he's so much more democratic than I am, because I'm listening to this business case and the incentives, and I'm thinking, no. No, I would go for imposing it. I would go for a de facto CCAM should be sustainable together, and this is how it should be, and making it at the political level as important as safety is. It's beyond debate for me. You are more democratic than
I don't dare to disagree with Joanna, just for records.
Well, I think that initiatives like this, when you really can discuss and lift up important questions, is really important. And today, to discuss how we can incorporate automated vehicles and sustainability is really important. So I think, continuing this direction will really do a big difference, I think.
Continuing the dialogue.
Yeah.
I guess that William is going to be the last one. Well, it's my role, I guess, to say that I would ask for more education and research, going back to what you said, increasing funding, but most importantly, this kind of Europe is going to be built by our children today. So I guess that we really have to emphasize on this so that they have their priorities in the way that we want them to have them. And it's moving in this direction, especially in Europe, compared to Asia and other continents, and maybe it's a strength that we will have in the future. So we talked about technology, we talked about regulation, we talked about other issues, but I think that, and from Carnet, I think that now it's my role to say education and research and moving forward together.
Well, my silly one is I really want a sustainable fusion reaction so we can, stop worrying about our energy future. But I think diversified energy portfolio would cover that. But I think the real kind of aspirational goal that I have is that we can not sacrifice carbonless travel, so our walking and cycling footprint, and really facilitate, encourage that. So this is a very practical and grounded solution in a way that kind of embraces this notion of like Pope Francis's Laudato Si, which is like care for our common home, and recognize that like we all live in this planet together. So I guess in line with that, thank you for allowing a person from halfway around the planet to be here and to maybe provide some different perspectives. But I think we can see that our perspectives are perhaps more similar than they are different. And we should work towards the care of our common home.
Thank you very much for all your inputs. Yeah, and also for like sharing not only from the technology side, but as you said, it's also about not forgetting active modes, not forgetting the public transportation as well, and also seeing how we can integrate like different energy options. So, and with that, we would like to thank all our speakers for sharing their wisdom with us, and also thank our colleagues managing the Slido, Lucie Baumel from EGVIA, and also Julie Kasterman from Ertico, and also our rapporteur, Xiang Chang from MapTM, and also, of course, my co-moderator, Stefan.